Gentlemen, it is a profound honor to stand before you today and speak about a force more powerful than fear, doubt, or uncertainty, the power of trusting God fully. When we surrender ourselves to His wisdom, when we place our hearts in His hands without hesitation, we open the door to transformation. Life, with all its challenges and mysteries, begins to align in ways we could never have imagined. Faith is not a passive act. It is an active, vibrant commitment to believe that the best is yet to come. Today, let us journey together into the profound freedom and joy that comes when trust becomes our guiding light. Ladies and gentlemen, to speak of trust in God is to speak of a journey that begins deep within the heart, where doubt often resides and fear lurks silently. There are moments in life when the weight of uncertainty presses upon the soul so heavily that it becomes difficult to breathe, difficult to see beyond the horizon of despair. And yet, it is precisely in these moments when the world seems to grow dark and the path ahead appears shadowed with doubt, that the power of complete trust in God becomes most essential. To trust Him fully is to lay down the burdens of fear, to release the anxious thoughts that clamor ceaselessly in the mind, and to open the heart to a wisdom far greater than our own. For when we trust, we acknowledge that there is a guiding force at work, a force that orchestrates the unfolding of our lives in ways that we cannot always comprehend, but can come to embrace with grace. Fear, ladies and gentlemen, is a master of disguise. It wears many faces and speaks in many tongues. It whispers in the quiet moments, telling us that we are not enough, that we are too weak, that the storms ahead will consume us. It tells us to cling to control, to grasp at the things we can see and touch, and to resist surrender. And yet, when we place our trust fully in God, fear loses its power. Trust acts as a light in the darkness, illuminating the path before us, revealing that the shadows we feared are not permanent, that they are but passing clouds that drift across the vast expanse of a sky that belongs to a faithful God. Trust is not merely a passive acceptance. It is an active, deliberate choice to step forward with courage, to believe that even when we cannot understand the plan, there is a plan and it is good. Consider for a moment the nature of worry. Worry is the restless companion of fear, a constant echo in the chambers of the mind that questions, doubts, and speculates about what might go wrong. It is an endless cycle of imagining worst-case scenarios, of rehearsing failures that have not yet come to pass, and of exhausting the spirit in futile anticipation. But trust in God is the antidote to this relentless strain. When we entrust our lives to Him, we declare, silently and resolutely, that we will not carry the burdens alone, that we do not need to navigate the complexities of life by our own limited understanding. In the surrender of trust, there is relief, a lifting of the shoulders, a softening of the heart, because we recognize that the Creator who breathed life into us and knows the number of stars in the heavens also knows the details of our lives. There are times when trust is easy, when life flows with rhythm and grace, and the blessings of God are evident in every corner of our existence. But true trust, the kind that releases fear and worry, is forged in the fires of adversity. It is in the moments when our plans falter, when doors close unexpectedly, when relationships strain and health falters, that trust is tested and strengthened. In these moments, to trust fully is to look beyond the immediate pain and to believe in the ultimate goodness of God's plan. It is to understand that what we perceive as obstacles or delays are often instruments of growth, shaping our character, refining our hearts, and drawing us closer to the source of all wisdom and love. Fear cannot thrive where trust resides, because trust brings clarity and perspective. It reminds us that life's storms are not meant to drown us, but to teach us to navigate with faith as our compass. Trust is a language of the soul, one that speaks without words, but is understood in the quiet moments of reflection and prayer. When we trust God completely, we begin to notice a subtle but profound shift within ourselves. The restless thoughts that once consumed us lose their urgency. The anxiety that made us tremble at the unknown begins to dissolve. Our hearts, once heavy with apprehension, begin to beat with a rhythm of peace. And in this peace, we find freedom, not a freedom from challenges, but a freedom to face them without the paralyzing weight of fear. Trust does not remove the trials of life, but it changes the way we encounter them. It gives us strength when our own is insufficient, courage when our own falters, and wisdom when our own understanding is limited. It is important to remember that trust is not blind or naive. It does not ask us to ignore reality or to pretend that difficulties do not exist. Rather, it invites us to place our faith in a God who sees all things, who knows all outcomes, and whose love for us is steadfast and unwavering. Trust requires honesty, the courage to acknowledge our fears and worries, and the humility to surrender them to a higher power. It is a daily practice, a conscious choice to lean not on our own understanding, but on the promise of divine guidance. Each morning, as the sun rises and a new day begins, we are given the opportunity to reaffirm our trust, to let go of the burdens of yesterday, and to step into the day with confidence that we are held, guided, and cared for by a faithful God. In the practice of trust, we also discover the beauty of patience. Fear and worry often demand immediate solutions, immediate reassurances, immediate answers. Trust, however, teaches us to wait with grace, to allow God's timing to unfold, and to recognize that His ways are higher than ours. When we release our grip on the need to control, when we stop striving to manipulate outcomes, we create space for miracles to emerge. The life-transforming power of trust is revealed not only in the resolution of our struggles, but in the quiet daily moments where we witness the subtle hand of God guiding our steps, opening doors, and orchestrating circumstances that align perfectly with His purpose for us. And so, ladies and gentlemen, to trust God fully is to embark on a journey that liberates the soul from the tyranny of fear and the chains of worry. It is a path of courage, humility, patience, and hope. It is a path that calls us to release our need for certainty, to embrace the unknown with faith, and to walk boldly knowing that we are never alone. When trust becomes our constant companion, we begin to live not in the shadows of fear, but in the radiant light of divine assurance. Every decision, every challenge, every joy, and every sorrow is met with the confidence that comes from knowing that God is in control, that He is faithful, and that His love never fails. In this surrender, fear loses its grip and worry fades into insignificance. We begin to notice the subtle ways in which God's presence manifests in our lives, in the smile of a friend, in the kindness of a stranger, in the opportunities that arise when we least expect them. Trust transforms ordinary moments into extraordinary blessings, mundane routines into sacred rituals, and ordinary challenges into profound lessons of resilience, faith, and hope. We begin to understand that life is not meant to be endured, but to be embraced with confidence in the one who holds all things together. As we cultivate trust, we also cultivate gratitude. The heart that trusts is a heart that sees the blessings even in the midst of difficulty, that recognizes the lessons in every setback, and that celebrates the victories, no matter how small, with a spirit of thankfulness. Trust and gratitude are inseparable companions. Together, they create a life that is anchored in faith, buoyed by hope, and illuminated by the love of God. And so, ladies and gentlemen, in the act of trusting God fully, we find liberation, we find peace, we find courage, we find a clarity that dispels confusion, a light that dispels darkness, and a joy that transcends circumstance. Our lives, once weighed down by fear and worry, begin to soar with the freedom that comes from surrender, from placing every fear, every doubt, and every anxious thought into the hands of the Almighty. And in this freedom, in this trust, we discover a life transformed, a soul renewed, and a spirit aligned with the divine purpose for which we were created. Ladies and gentlemen, to speak of faith is to speak of an invisible yet mighty force that resides within each one of us, a force that, when nurtured, gives us the strength to stand tall, even when the winds of life howl around us. Faith is not a mere belief. It is a deep, unwavering conviction that no matter how fierce the storm, no matter how dark the night, there exists a light that guides us, a presence that sustains us, and a power that equips us to rise above our fears. It is faith that allows a trembling heart to take a courageous step forward, that gives the weary soul the strength to continue, and that whispers, even in the midst of despair, that hope is alive and victory is near. Courage and faith are intertwined, inseparable companions on the journey of life. One cannot exist fully without the other, for courage without faith can falter in the face of adversity, and faith without courage can remain dormant, hidden behind hesitation and doubt. It is faith that stirs the courage within us, that compels us to confront our challenges head on, rather than retreat in fear. Life, ladies and gentlemen, is a series of tests, a landscape filled with obstacles both seen and unseen. And it is through faith that we summon the inner strength to navigate these trials. To face a challenge with courage is not to deny its difficulty, but to acknowledge it with confidence that we are not alone, that we have a source of power greater than any obstacle we encounter. When we are confronted with hardships, whether they are personal struggles, health crises, financial burdens, or broken relationships, it is natural for fear and doubt to emerge. These are human responses, inevitable and understandable, yet they are not the final word. Faith has the extraordinary ability to shift our perspective. It allows us to see beyond the immediate pain, to glimpse the possibility of growth, healing, and triumph. Faith whispers to the heart that even when the world seems to close in around us, even when our resources seem depleted, and even when the path ahead is unclear, we are equipped to rise. Courage does not come from the absence of difficulty, but from the presence of faith, the conviction that there is a purpose behind the pain, and that every challenge is an opportunity to strengthen the soul. Ladies and gentlemen, consider the power of faith in the lives of those who have faced unimaginable trials and yet emerged victorious. History is filled with stories of individuals who, armed with faith, confronted the impossible and triumphed. They faced oppression, illness, loss, and betrayal, yet their faith became their armor, their shield, and their source of unshakable courage. Faith empowers us not because it makes the challenge disappear, but because it transforms us from within, fortifying our hearts, steadying our minds, and giving wings to our spirits so that we can soar above circumstances that might otherwise weigh us down. Courage fueled by faith is a quiet, persistent force. It does not always roar or demand attention. Often, it is a gentle, steady presence that sustains us when we are alone, that lifts us when we stumble, and that reminds us, softly but insistently, that we are capable of more than we realize. Faith gives us the courage to confront the truths about ourselves that we might otherwise ignore, the weaknesses, the doubts, and the fears, and to transform them into sources of strength. It allows us to act even when the outcome is uncertain, to speak even when our voices tremble, and to love even when our hearts have been wounded. It is important to recognize that facing life's challenges with courage does not mean we will never feel fear. Fear is a natural companion in moments of uncertainty, but faith teaches us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward in spite of it. It is the recognition that our strength comes not solely from ourselves, but from a divine source that is steadfast, unchanging, and faithful. Faith empowers us to stand firm when others would falter, to persevere when others would quit, and to hope when others would despair. It is the fuel that ignites the spirit, allowing us to confront adversity with a resilience that is both humble and bold. Faith also grants us clarity and discernment in the midst of challenges. When faced with difficult decisions, when paths seem tangled and options seem limited, faith illuminates the way, guiding us toward choices that align with our purpose and values. It strengthens our resolve, sharpens our focus, and enables us to act with confidence, knowing that even if the road is difficult, we are supported by a power that is greater than our own understanding. This clarity nurtures courage, for the heart that knows it is guided and protected is a heart that dares to move forward despite uncertainty. There is a transformative power in faith that cannot be overstated. When we embrace faith fully, challenges become opportunities, setbacks become lessons, and obstacles become stepping stones. Courage arises naturally, not as a fleeting emotion, but as a deep-seated strength that grows with every act of trust and every step of obedience. Faith empowers us to face life's challenges with dignity, grace, and determination, knowing that even when the outcome is unknown, the journey itself has value, and the growth we experience along the way shapes us into stronger, wiser, and more compassionate beings. Moreover, faith instills perseverance. In moments when we feel we cannot continue, faith reminds us that strength is renewed daily, that we are capable of enduring far more than we imagine, and that each trial carries within it the seed of triumph. Courage fueled by faith is not impulsive or reckless. It is steadfast, measured, and resilient. It allows us to move through difficulty with purpose and intentionality, to remain hopeful when circumstances challenge our resolve, and to rise after every fall with renewed determination. Faith and courage together create a rhythm of resilience, a cycle of endurance, and a pattern of triumph that becomes a defining characteristic of our lives. Faith also nurtures compassion and empathy as we confront challenges. When we face our own struggles with courage, we develop a deeper understanding of the struggles of others. We become more patient, more understanding, and more willing to lend support to those in need. Courage, empowered by faith, is not self-centered. It radiates outward, touching lives, inspiring others, and creating ripples of hope and encouragement. In this way, our own journey through trials becomes a source of strength not only for ourselves, but for everyone around us. Ladies and gentlemen, to face life's challenges with courage is to embrace a way of living that is both active and conscious. It is to acknowledge that difficulty is inevitable, but defeat is optional. It is to recognize that fear may arise, yet it need not dictate our actions. It is to stand firm in the knowledge that we are not alone, that our faith equips us with the tools, the wisdom, and the resilience needed to navigate life's storms. Courage, born of faith, transforms ordinary moments into opportunities for growth, adversity into triumph, and uncertainty into hope. Faith empowers us to embrace the unknown with confidence, to step into situations that challenge us with bravery, and to face obstacles with a sense of purpose that transcends mere survival. It cultivates a mindset of resilience, allowing us to see beyond temporary setbacks and to focus on the bigger picture of our journey. The courage that emerges from faith is steady, unwavering, and deeply rooted in the understanding that every challenge is part of a larger plan, one that is ultimately guided by divine wisdom and love. As we cultivate faith in our lives, we begin to notice its subtle yet profound impact. Decisions that once paralyzed us become opportunities for growth. Challenges that once intimidated us become occasions to demonstrate resilience. Obstacles that once seemed insurmountable become stepping stones that lead to greater heights. Faith empowers us not only to survive, but to thrive, to rise above adversity, and to face life with a boldness that is grounded in trust, hope, and divine guidance. Ladies and gentlemen, to speak of divine timing is to speak of a rhythm greater than our own, a cadence that governs the universe with precision and wisdom beyond our comprehension. Trust, when embraced fully, becomes the key that unlocks this rhythm in our lives, allowing us to move in harmony with a plan far larger than our own. There is a tendency, as human beings, to want everything according to our schedule, to demand immediacy, to feel entitled to instant results. Yet, life, in its infinite complexity, is rarely so simple. Every moment unfolds according to a divine order. Every opportunity arrives at the appointed hour, and every blessing manifests in a time that is perfect, even when we cannot yet perceive it. To trust in God fully is to acknowledge that His timing is flawless, that the moments we anticipate may not be the moments we receive, and that in surrendering our expectations, we open the door to abundant blessings that surpass our imagination. It is in the very act of waiting, of yielding to divine timing, that trust is most profoundly tested and most richly rewarded. We live in a culture that glorifies speed, instant gratification, and immediate results, and yet there is a power in patience, a depth in waiting, and a wisdom in allowing events to unfold in their appointed season. Trust teaches us that life does not always progress according to our plans, and that deviation from our expectations is not failure, but part of a greater orchestration. When we trust fully, we release the urgency to force outcomes, and in doing so, we position ourselves to receive blessings that are tailored perfectly for our lives. There is a sacredness in divine timing, a perfection in the way the universe aligns circumstances, people, and events to create the outcomes we need, even when they are not the outcomes we initially imagined. Consider, for a moment, the moments in your life where impatience or doubt tempted you to act prematurely, to rush ahead, to try to control what was not yet ready to be controlled. In retrospect, we often recognize that those moments were blessings in disguise, opportunities for growth, patience, and preparation. Trust allows us to see beyond the immediate frustration, beyond the seeming delay, and to understand that what appears late to us is always on time in the grand design of God. There is a profound peace in this understanding, a serenity that settles over the heart when we realize that we are held by a power greater than ourselves, and that every delay, every pause, and every season of waiting serves a purpose. Trusting God fully means acknowledging that we do not have all the answers, that our understanding is limited, and that His wisdom surpasses our comprehension. We may not see why certain doors close, why certain opportunities are delayed, or why certain people come and go from our lives, yet trust allows us to release anxiety over the unknown. It allows us to step into each day with confidence, knowing that even when life appears uncertain, we are guided by a force that is infallible and benevolent. Faith becomes the lens through which we view every circumstance, revealing that there is a pattern to the unfolding of our lives, that blessings are always on their way, and that divine timing is a gift we receive when we relinquish our need to control. There is a transformative power in understanding that blessings do not always arrive when we want them, but they arrive when we need them. Trust aligns us with this timing, teaching us patience, humility, and resilience. We begin to see that the challenges we face, the delays we encounter, and the trials that test our patience are not obstacles, but preparations. They are the soil in which our faith grows, the crucible in which our character is refined, and the classroom in which we learn to rely fully on God's timing rather than our own. When we trust, we no longer measure success by the speed of its arrival, but by the depth of its impact, the richness of its lessons, and the alignment of its manifestation with our highest good. Trusting God fully also means releasing comparison, the habit of measuring our progress against the timelines of others. Each life unfolds uniquely. Each journey follows a different path, and each blessing arrives according to its own schedule. When we cling to our own timelines, we risk anxiety, frustration, and disappointment. Trust liberates us from these pressures. It teaches us to rejoice in our own season, to celebrate progress in its proper time, and to embrace the unfolding of life as a sacred journey. By relinquishing the need to control timing, we become more attuned to the subtle ways in which God is orchestrating events, preparing us for opportunities, and blessing us in ways we may not yet recognize. Moreover, trust in divine timing fosters gratitude. When we learn to wait, to surrender, and to align with God's plan, we begin to notice the blessings that were always present but overlooked. The small joys, the quiet miracles, the gentle guidance of providence become visible to eyes attuned to faith. Gratitude and trust are partners. Together, they create a heart that is open, receptive, and aware of the abundant goodness surrounding us. By trusting fully, we cultivate patience, peace, and a deeper awareness of the sacredness of life's unfolding moments. Trust also empowers us to act with discernment. While patience is necessary, trust is not passive. It is an active engagement with life, a deliberate choice to move forward in alignment with divine guidance rather than impulse. When we trust, we are better able to recognize the signs, the opportunities, and the moments that are meant for us. We act with wisdom rather than haste. We seize opportunities that are ready rather than forcing outcomes prematurely, and we step boldly into circumstances that are aligned with our purpose. Trust teaches us that timing is not just about waiting, but about preparation, alignment, and action in harmony with God's plan. Consider the moments when blessings arrived unexpectedly, when solutions appeared just as hope seemed dim, or when opportunities opened at the precise moment they were most needed. These are not coincidences. They are the fruits of divine timing, the results of a life attuned to trust. Trust allows us to recognize these blessings when they appear, to receive them with grace, and to use them wisely. It teaches us that life is not a series of random events, but a carefully orchestrated symphony in which each note, each pause, and each crescendo occurs at the perfect moment. To align with this timing is to step into a rhythm of life that is both empowering and liberating. Ladies and gentlemen, trusting God fully transforms our relationship with time itself. We no longer live in constant anxiety over what has not yet come or what we fear may never arrive. Instead, we embrace each moment with faith, knowing that every season has its purpose, every delay has its lesson, and every blessing will manifest when it is most meaningful. Trust shifts our focus from impatience to preparedness, from doubt to assurance, and from striving to surrender. In this alignment, life unfolds with elegance, grace, and a sense of divine orchestration that reassures the heart and strengthens the spirit. Furthermore, trust aligns us with the interconnectedness of all blessings. It teaches us that timing is not only about the arrival of opportunities, but also about relationships, experiences, and personal growth. We begin to understand that the people we meet, the experiences we undergo, and even the challenges we face are all components of a larger design. When we trust, we see the way these elements weave together, creating pathways for growth, joy, and fulfillment. Divine timing ensures that blessings are not isolated events, but part of a larger tapestry intricately designed for our highest good. Trust encourages us to surrender control while embracing responsibility. We are responsible for our actions, our decisions, and our growth, yet we are not responsible for forcing outcomes that are not yet ready to manifest. By trusting fully, we release the tension of control, act with integrity, and remain open to the flow of blessings in their appointed time. We develop patience without passivity, hope without despair, and faith without wavering. In this dynamic balance, trust becomes both a compass and a guide, leading us through uncertainty with confidence and clarity. As we cultivate trust in divine timing, we also cultivate resilience. Challenges, delays, and disappointments no longer break us. They prepare us. They teach us lessons that can only be learned through waiting, patience, and reflection. They shape our character, refine our discernment, and deepen our faith. Through trust, we learn that each season of waiting, each period of uncertainty, and each moment of preparation is a blessing in disguise, orchestrated to align us with the fullness of life that awaits. Trusting God fully aligns us not only with external blessings, but also with the inner blessings of peace, patience, and joy. It transforms anxiety into serenity, impatience into readiness, and longing into contentment. It allows us to recognize that life is unfolding perfectly, that every moment carries a purpose, and that divine timing is an expression of love, wisdom, and care beyond measure. In this alignment, we are not simply waiting, we are preparing, growing, and participating in the miraculous unfolding of a life in harmony with God's design. Ladies and gentlemen, to speak of surrender is to speak of a strength that is often misunderstood, a strength that does not shout, does not demand, but quietly reshapes the soul. Surrendering control is not an act of weakness. It is the most profound declaration of trust, the most courageous choice a human heart can make. It is the recognition that we are not omnipotent, that the weight of life's challenges can be too great for our understanding alone, and that in letting go, we make room for transformation. Struggles are inevitable, they are universal, and they touch every life in some form. Yet it is in the act of surrender that these struggles cease to be mere obstacles and become instruments of growth, refining us, shaping our character, and teaching lessons that nothing else can impart. Life, in its complexity, often tempts us to grasp for control, to cling to certainty, to believe that if we just work harder, push longer, or plan more meticulously, we can shape outcomes perfectly. Yet, in reality, control is an illusion. The tides of circumstance ebb and flow, events unfold in ways we cannot predict, and people act in ways we cannot dictate. The moment we recognize this, the moment we release our grip, something extraordinary begins to happen. Surrender allows the heart to breathe, the mind to calm, and the spirit to open to lessons that could not have been learned in the grip of resistance. Struggles, when met with surrendered hearts, transform from sources of despair into opportunities for insight, resilience, and profound personal growth. Surrendering control is an act of faith, a declaration that we trust in a power greater than our own understanding. It is an acknowledgement that life's unfolding is part of a larger plan, and that our role is not to force outcomes, but to navigate the journey with grace, wisdom, and patience. When we resist surrender, struggles can become prisons, confining us in cycles of fear, anxiety, and frustration. But when we release the need to dictate every outcome, when we allow life to flow with its natural rhythm, the same struggles that once threatened to overwhelm us begin to teach, strengthen, and elevate us. The act of letting go does not mean inaction. It is a conscious, intentional choice to participate in life with openness rather than rigidity, with trust rather than fear. Consider the ways in which surrender transforms challenges into growth. When a difficulty arises, our first instinct may be to resist, to push back, to control the situation. Yet, resistance often magnifies struggle, creating tension, anxiety, and a sense of futility. Surrender, on the other hand, redirects energy from futile control to constructive action. It allows us to assess situations with clarity, respond with wisdom rather than reaction, and discover lessons that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. Every struggle carries within it the seed of growth. Surrender is the fertile soil in which that seed takes root, nurtures, and flourishes. Ladies and gentlemen, surrendering control also cultivates humility. To admit that we cannot manage every detail, that life is larger than our understanding, and that we require guidance beyond ourselves is a profound act of strength. Humility allows us to receive help, to learn from experience, and to be molded by circumstance rather than hardened by it. It teaches us that growth is rarely immediate, that lessons are often subtle, and that the path to transformation is paved with patience, reflection, and willingness to let go of what we cannot change. In surrender, the heart learns to bend without breaking, to flow without resistance, and to trust without conditions. When we surrender control, we also embrace vulnerability, that sacred space where true growth occurs. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is the openness to experience life fully, to encounter struggle honestly, and to allow the soul to expand beyond fear. Struggles, when met with vulnerability, become mirrors, reflecting the truths of who we are, illuminating areas that require courage, compassion, and transformation. Surrender opens the door to this self-discovery, allowing us to face our limitations not with shame, but with curiosity, patience, and hope. Through surrender, we realize that the power to grow lies not in controlling events, but in controlling our responses, in shaping our attitudes, and in nurturing resilience within ourselves. Life often presents struggles that test every fiber of our being: loss, betrayal, disappointment, failure, and uncertainty. In these moments, the urge to control is strongest, the desire to dictate outcomes most pressing. Yet, it is precisely in these moments that surrender becomes transformative. By releasing our grip, we invite wisdom, patience, and insight into our lives. We begin to see that the difficulties are not arbitrary. They are opportunities to cultivate strength, empathy, perseverance, and understanding. Surrender allows us to step back, observe with clarity, and engage with challenges not as adversaries to be conquered, but as teachers to be honored and lessons to be absorbed. Trusting the process, allowing life to unfold, and surrendering control is a pathway to resilience. Resilience is not simply bouncing back. It is the capacity to bend, adapt, and grow stronger through adversity. When we release the illusion of control, resilience emerges naturally, for we no longer expend energy on resistance, but channel it into reflection, learning, and constructive action. Every struggle becomes a classroom, every obstacle a stepping stone, and every challenge a crucible in which our character, faith, and courage are refined. Surrender transforms suffering into wisdom, difficulty into strength, and fear into a source of power. Furthermore, surrendering control fosters peace. Anxiety, stress, and worry often arise from the insistence that life must conform to our expectations. When we release control, we free ourselves from this burden. Peace emerges not from the absence of struggle, but from the acceptance of life's natural flow. The heart that surrenders is lighter, the mind that releases tension is clearer, and the spirit that trusts is empowered. Through surrender, we experience life with greater presence, awareness, and appreciation. We begin to recognize that growth is not only measured in achievements, but also in the grace, patience, and wisdom cultivated along the journey. Surrendering control also deepens our connection with the divine. When we acknowledge our limitations and release the need to orchestrate every outcome, we invite guidance, support, and blessings from a higher power. Life's struggles are no longer burdens carried alone, but shared experiences in which divine wisdom participates. This connection enhances our capacity for growth, providing insight, strength, and clarity that surpass our own understanding. Trusting the process, embracing surrender, and opening ourselves to divine guidance transforms struggles from sources of frustration into instruments of transformation, illumination, and personal evolution. Consider, too, the ripple effect of surrender. When we let go of control, we influence the world around us. Our relationships deepen, our interactions become more compassionate, and our presence becomes a source of calm and inspiration. Others sense the peace and strength cultivated through surrender, and in turn are encouraged to release their own fears and embrace growth. Struggles no longer remain isolated burdens. They become shared opportunities for learning, empathy, and collective strength. Surrender transforms not only the individual, but also the community, creating an environment in which growth, resilience, and trust are nurtured and celebrated. Ladies and gentlemen, surrendering control is an ongoing practice, a conscious choice repeated in each moment of life. It is not a single act, but a daily commitment to trust, to release, and to allow life to unfold in its natural rhythm. The struggles we face, the obstacles we encounter, and the challenges that seem insurmountable are all invitations to practice surrender. With each act of letting go, we grow stronger, wiser, and more capable of meeting life with courage, grace, and insight. Transformation occurs not in spite of struggles, but because of them, when approached with surrendered hearts and minds willing to learn, adapt, and evolve. Surrendering control transforms our relationship with struggle itself. No longer do we perceive challenges as enemies, as unfair burdens, or as reasons for despair. Instead, we see them as opportunities, as catalysts for growth, and as instruments of divine guidance. Each difficulty becomes a teacher, each obstacle a lesson, and each trial a chance to cultivate the qualities that define our highest selves. Surrender allows us to approach life with humility, patience, and wisdom, and to recognize that growth is the ultimate reward for those willing to release control and embrace the transformative power of trust. When we surrender control, we also cultivate courage. It takes bravery to let go of the need to dictate outcomes, to release attachment to expectations, and to trust that life will unfold in alignment with divine wisdom. Yet, this courage is strengthened with each challenge we meet with openness rather than resistance. Struggles become the forge in which our resilience is tempered, our character refined, and our spirit strengthened. Through surrender, fear is replaced with confidence, resistance gives way to flow, and limitation transforms into opportunity. Surrendering control is not passive resignation. It is active participation in life, guided by faith, awareness, and intention. It is a dynamic practice of observing, reflecting, and responding rather than reacting, of trusting rather than forcing, and of growing rather than resisting. Life's struggles, when met with surrendered hearts, become powerful agents of transformation, shaping our perspectives, refining our values, and deepening our capacity for compassion, resilience, and joy. Ladies and gentlemen, to speak of living with trust is to speak of a state of being that transforms the very essence of our lives. Trust is more than a mere belief. It is a posture of the heart, a rhythm of the spirit, a conscious choice to surrender the weight of fear, doubt, and uncertainty to a power greater than ourselves. When we live with trust, life unfolds with a richness and vibrancy that cannot be forced, cannot be manufactured, and cannot be fully understood by those who cling tightly to control. Trust invites us to release our anxieties, to let go of our need to manipulate outcomes, and to step into the current of life with courage, faith, and hope. In living with trust, we cultivate joy, peace, and purpose in ways that are profound, subtle, and enduring, touching every aspect of our being and every corner of our lives. Joy, ladies and gentlemen, is born of trust. It is not dependent on circumstance, wealth, or external validation. It is cultivated in the heart that knows it is held, guided, and supported. When we trust fully, we are free to embrace life's blessings without fear of loss, without the weight of expectation, and without the burden of comparing ourselves to others. Joy flows naturally from a spirit that is anchored in trust, a spirit that can celebrate even in the midst of challenges, that can find delight in small moments, and that can rise above despair to see the beauty, grace, and goodness present in every day. Trust transforms ordinary experiences into extraordinary gifts, allowing us to receive life with wonder, gratitude, and delight. Peace is the companion of trust. Anxiety, worry, and restlessness often arise from the illusion that we are in control, from the fear that life will not align with our desires, and from the endless striving to secure certainty in an uncertain world. Trust dissolves these tensions, creating a calm center in the heart, a quiet space in the mind, and a clarity in the spirit. Peace is not merely the absence of struggle, it is the presence of assurance, the deejus knowledge that we are held by a loving, wise, and faithful power. Living with trust allows us to navigate life with equanimity, to remain steady amid turbulence, and to respond to challenges with clarity rather than panic, with confidence rather than hesitation, and with a sense of assurance that every moment is part of a divine orchestration. Purpose emerges naturally from trust. When we live in alignment with a higher power, when our actions, intentions, and decisions are guided by faith, life gains coherence, meaning, and direction. Trust provides a lens through which we can view our experiences not as random events, but as interconnected moments that contribute to our growth, learning, and ultimate fulfillment. It allows us to see the significance in our choices, the value in our efforts, and the impact of our presence in the lives of others. Living with trust is not passive. It is an active engagement with life that imbues every action with intention, every interaction with significance, and every challenge with potential for transformation. Consider for a moment the ways in which trust cultivates joy in the midst of difficulty. Life is never without trials, obstacles, or heartbreaks. Yet, the heart that trusts sees these challenges not as threats to happiness, but as opportunities for growth, learning, and resilience. Joy becomes a conscious decision, a deliberate embrace of the good, the beautiful, and the meaningful, even when circumstances appear bleak. It is a joy grounded in faith, sustained by hope, and enriched by the understanding that every experience, whether joyful or painful, contributes to the fullness of life and the shaping of the soul. Peace, too, is deepened through trust. In surrendering our need to control, we release the tension that comes from resisting life's natural flow. We learn to accept what cannot be changed, to act wisely where we have influence, and to navigate uncertainty with confidence rather than fear. Trust transforms restlessness into calm, impatience into patience, and fear into reassurance. When we live with trust, our inner world becomes a sanctuary, a place where clarity, serenity, and balance prevail regardless of external circumstance. This peace is not a fleeting feeling, but a steady foundation that supports us through every trial, triumph, and transition. Purpose arises when trust guides our actions and informs our choices. We begin to see that our lives are not random, that our gifts, talents, and experiences are meant to contribute to a larger design. Trust encourages us to step boldly into our calling, to embrace responsibilities with confidence, and to participate fully in the unfolding of our lives. Purpose provides motivation, direction, and meaning, allowing us to move through life with a sense of intentionality that is deeply satisfying and profoundly fulfilling. Living with trust means aligning our will with a higher wisdom, acting with integrity, and pursuing goals that resonate with the true essence of our being. Ladies and gentlemen, trust transforms the way we relate to others. Relationships flourish when trust is present, because trust fosters patience, empathy, understanding, and forgiveness. When we trust in the goodness of life, in the intentions of the universe, and in the inherent worth of others, we are less likely to judge, fear, or resist. We are more open to connection, more willing to support, and more capable of giving and receiving love freely. Joy, peace, and purpose are not solitary experiences. They extend outward, enriching our interactions and nurturing our communities. Trust creates an environment in which relationships thrive, in which collaboration and compassion are possible, and in which mutual growth becomes a shared journey. Living with trust also cultivates resilience. Life is unpredictable, filled with challenges, setbacks, and moments of uncertainty. Without trust, these experiences can lead to despair, frustration, and hopelessness. But when we embrace trust fully, we approach challenges with courage, confidence, and clarity. We recognize that difficulties are temporary, that setbacks are opportunities for learning, and that every experience contributes to the development of strength, character, and wisdom. Trust provides the foundation for endurance, enabling us to rise after failure, to persist through adversity, and to maintain a sense of balance and composure even when circumstances are difficult. Joy, peace, and purpose are interconnected through trust. Joy emerges from a heart that believes, peace flows from a mind that surrenders, and purpose arises from a soul aligned with a higher plan. Together, they create a life that is fulfilling, meaningful, and vibrant. Trust is the catalyst that brings these elements into harmony, allowing us to experience life fully rather than merely endure it. It invites us to see the blessings in every moment, to find contentment in the journey, and to recognize the sacredness inherent in every day. Trust also enhances our capacity for gratitude. When we live with trust, we are attuned to the gifts and blessings that surround us, even in the midst of challenges. Gratitude deepens our experience of joy, reinforces our sense of peace, and clarifies our purpose. It allows us to appreciate the present moment, to acknowledge the progress we have made, and to recognize the contributions of others in our journey. Trust, intertwined with gratitude, transforms life into a continuous celebration of faith, hope, and abundance. Furthermore, living with trust encourages reflection and self-awareness. It invites us to examine our motivations, our desires, and our actions through the lens of faith. By trusting the process, we gain perspective on our challenges, insight into our potential, and clarity regarding our path. Trust nurtures discernment, allowing us to make choices aligned with our highest good, to pursue opportunities with confidence, and to release what no longer serves us. Through this process, joy, peace, and purpose become natural expressions of a life lived in harmony with divine guidance and inner wisdom. Ladies and gentlemen, trust is not a passive state, but an active engagement with life. It requires vigilance, intention, and practice. It asks us to release fear, embrace uncertainty, and align with a higher wisdom that sees beyond the immediate moment. Yet, in doing so, it rewards us with joy that transcends circumstance, peace that steadies the heart, and purpose that infuses every action with meaning. Living with trust transforms ordinary existence into extraordinary experience, infusing our days with vibrancy, resilience, and clarity. Trust empowers us to celebrate life fully, even amidst challenges. It allows us to engage with our work, our relationships, and our personal growth with enthusiasm and confidence. Joy is not deferred, peace is not postponed, and purpose is not hidden. They are accessible in every moment when we choose to live with trust. By surrendering doubt, relinquishing fear, and embracing faith, we cultivate a life that is rich, vibrant, and meaningful. Trust becomes the lens through which we see possibility, the foundation upon which we build resilience, and the guiding light that illuminates our path.